Today we're going to talk about the license management system that is used with the Discovery software. So Discovery uses the FlexNet or FlexLM license security system. I've been using it for many years. We've gone through different iterations of it over the years, from GeoGraphix, moved to Landmark 1, and then now we're back over to our own separate one for LMKR. So we'll just kind of go through some stuff about that. We'll talk about license files, how to request them, difference between Bitlocks versus MAC address, difference between standalone versus network, and then we'll look at the actual license management tool, or LMT, that we provide in order to administer your licensing environment. We'll just look at the necessary installation of the Bitlocks drivers. If you use a Bitlocks, we'll go through a setup of a network license server, configuration of the environment, and how to replace an existing license file. All right, for license files, there's two main ways that you can request new license files. One is to send an email message to cos@lmkr.com, or you can also do it via the support portal itself. If you log onto the portal and then click on the license management tab across the top, you'll get a little form that you can fill out: your name, company, license information, what you're requesting. So whether it's a new one or an update to the new release, this is how you will request new license files. One isn't necessarily faster than the other. You can use both. And turnaround time is usually pretty quick. However, in times like this, when we've just released a new version of the software, people are just starting now to download 2015 and requesting new license files, so turnaround is relatively quick at this point, but that's going to kind of get longer and longer as more people start requesting it. So certainly allow up to a day to get a new license file. So make sure that you request and receive the license file before attempting to do any installation. Just because if you send in your request and then start downloading and installing the software, you may not have the file by the time you've actually finished the installation. All right, so as far as the license files, there's two different kind of copy protection that's with the license files. One is to either tie the license file to a Bitlocks or to a MAC address, and this is basically just for to limit where the license file and the software can be used. So if it's tied to a Bitlocks, it means that the software will only work if the Bitlocks is attached to the USB port on your computer. So the two different types of Bitlocks that we use are displayed on the screen. The one on the left is what we call a 9 series. It's older. It's kind of that greenish, translucent color. It's got a red light that comes on when it's connected. And then the newer one is on the right. It's kind of bluish. It's called the 10 series. It's the newer one that we're kind of transitioning to. So basically, that Bitlocks has to be attached to your PC in order to run the software. So what it does is it provides kind of portability. So if you get a standalone license, you can install the software on other machines. And if you need to run it on those other machines, you can just take the Bitlocks off, go home, plug it into your home computer, run the software there. Now, the other option is to tie the license file to a MAC address, which is a unique ID for the network adapter in your computer. The limitation with that is it will only work then on that specific computer. Since most network adapters are built into the motherboard, once a license file is tied to that machine, that's the only one it'll run on. So if you have standalone licenses, it just depends on whether you need portability of that license or not. If you're the only one that's ever going to be running that license, then I would recommend just going with the MAC address one, as there's you don't have to worry about a Bitlocks getting lost or stolen or broken. Now, as far as license files themselves, there's two different types. There's a standalone and a network license. So with a standalone license, all the license features in that license file are only accessible on that one PC at a time, and only obviously with the Bitlocks and correct MAC address. But the main thing is if you buy a standalone license, everything in that license file can only be used on that one computer. So regardless of whether you have cross-section and smart section and size vision 3D and you're only running GeoAtlas, those other modules aren't accessible to anybody else because it's a standalone license. Now, the other option is a network license, where you put all your license features onto a license server, and then those features can be checked out from any computer on the network. So depending, you could have different number of each of the different modules, and if you want to run size vision, it'll check out a license feature from the license server if it's available. And if you're not using it, it checks it back in and somebody else can use it. So you're not tying up all the license features. It allows you to kind of float those licenses around to any computer on your network. All right, we'll have a quick look at the actual license files themselves. Standalone license files, so basically if you ever open up your license file, you look at it and there's just a bunch of different feature sections, just feature, 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 feature all the way down. And each one will just start feature. There'll be a data manager, which is what allows you to start the software. There'll be DSC GeoAtlas and Prism and Size Vision, all the different license features that we have. And so within each one of those little sections is the information pertaining to that one particular feature. So in this case, when we look at feature, it'll have the name of the feature first, so like GGX DSC Data Manager. Box number 3 is the version information, so our licenses have version control. So this license file will only work with 2013 and older versions. So if you install 2014, this license file will not work. So that's why it's important for you to get your license file before attempting to install any sort of new releases. So if you get a license, if you install a new release and you get an error message about a license feature not available, if you look in here, you can check the version information on box 3 and see what version it was actually created for. The other box that you might want to look at is box number 4, which is an expiration date. A lot of times license features, if they're like demo licenses, because you're demoing a new feature, leasing different modules, whatever, there could be an expiration date. And so that's what box number 4 is. Box number 5 kind of defines what this license file is tied to. So in this case, it says host ID equals flex ID equals 10-. So the flex ID equals part means that it's tied to a bitlock, and then the number after it's the flex ID of that bitlock. If it was a MAC address, it would say host ID equals and then a string of numbers and letters, which would be the MAC address. Network license files look pretty similar. They have the same kind of feature sections all the way down, except they start at the top with some additional lines that basically kind of define it as a network license. So that first line where it says server and then box 1 and 2. So the box 1 is the host name of the machine that's going to be running the license server. And box number 2 is either the MAC address or the bitlock ID that this license file is tied to. So the host name can be changed if necessary if the host name of your machine is different, but the MAC address or flex ID cannot. So if that's wrong when you get it, you need to request a new license file with it corrected. And then if you look down into the feature sections, it looks pretty much the same as it did with the standalone features, feature name, version control, expiration date, except the network ones have an additional field, which is box number 9. And this is the number of concurrent licenses for that particular feature. So in this case, Data Manager, it's got 2 licenses. That means 2 people can start Project Explorer. And you can have all the other different features in here can have different numbers of features. You can have 5 data managers, but only 1 size vision and 2 prisms, or and it will only allow the number of people to run based on what this number is. Now you can't edit anything in this file. You can't change that 2 to a 5 and have 5 data managers. You can't change December 2013 to December 2020 and run the license, keep using this license till 2020, or change the version. Anything that you try to edit in this license, other than kind of that the host name of the server on that first line, you edit anything in this file, you're immediately going to get an error message. The license system is going to detect that this license file has been modified, and you're going to have to get a new one from our licensing department. Okay, so the License Management Tool, or LMT, is the utility that we provide in order to help you, configure your environment. It's available for download from the support portal, same place where the Discovery software is. It is a required component that must be installed on all PCs running the Discovery software. So after you install the third-party tools, the Discovery software, you make sure you have to install the LMT. It's used to install and configure a network license server, or license service on your license server. And the main reason you got to install it is you also use it to configure the licensing environment. So you'll use this to install a standalone license or set the PC to check out a license from a network license server. Along with this tool, the installation directory also includes Bitlock driver installation software. We'll look at that in a moment. And one note I'll mention here, since we just released 2015, the Discovery 2015 software, there is a new version of this LMT that is required for Discovery 2015. So if you're going out onto the portal and downloading the 2015 release of Discovery, make sure you also grab the 2015 version of the LMT. It does require the new licensing software. You will need to uninstall the previous version of the LMT and then install the 2015 version. But other than that, everything else about it works identical to the existing version. It's just you need a newer version of it. All right, before we get into it, we'll just talk a little bit about the Bitlock drivers. So those are the two Bitlocks that we currently use, the 9 series on the left, 10 series on the right. The Bitlock driver installation program is in the installation directory along with the other LMT software. Under Program Files, LMKR Licensing, and the installation program for the driver is FlexID dongle driver installer.exe, so relatively self-explanatory. If you just run that program, take the defaults, it'll install the required drivers, and for the most part, that's often all that is required. However, there are cases, particularly if you're using the older 9 series Bitlocks, that additional drivers may be necessary. So if you have a Bitlock and you're having problems getting the software to recognize the Bitlock, there are some additional drivers that we may need to download and install. And another note about 2015 I'll mention, if you have Discovery 2015 and you have one of the 9 series, the ones on the left, the translucent green ones, that Bitlock does require some additional drivers. So after you install the LMT, the 2015 version of the LMT, if you go into that C program files, LMKR licensing directory, there's a program called FlexID9_shared_objects.cmd. It's a command file or a batch file essentially, and all that's going to do is copy some additional library files into the Windows System 32 directory. And because it's copying files into the Windows directory, you do need to run that as administrator. If you forget to do that part, what will happen is you'll install the software, you'll get your new license file, you'll try to install the 2015 license file, and it'll tell you that it is unable to read the Bitlock ID. And most of the time that's solved by just running that little program. But if you have any questions or problems, contact support and we can work with you on that. All right, so what I'll do now is I'll exit out of here and we'll actually go through an installation of a license server. So when you fire up the LMKR license management tool, these are the two options that you immediately get. I want to configure licensing for this computer, and I want to set up or manage a network license server. So what we'll do is we'll go through setup of a license server first. We're just going to take the defaults, but basically the first thing it's going to ask you is that box that's in red for the license file. So you will have received a license file from somebody at LMKR. We'll get our network license file here. It'll show you, okay, as it's uploading it from here, this is where it's going to put it. And you can click on view, and you can actually view the license file. So here's the host name, here's the MAC address, and you can see here's all the various feature lines. Now by default, we usually just recommend leaving the port number set to auto. What that means is it'll start with port 27,000 and roll up. So if port 27,000 is already in use, it'll go to 27,001, 2, 3, 4, and etc. until it finds one available and use it. You can, if you need to, uncheck that and specifically put in a port number here that you want to use, but I would typically recommend just leaving that set to auto. You click on next. So it's going to install an LMKR license service. The first thing you need to do is start that service. If there's any errors with starting the service, they'll appear in this big box on the right. Right now it says the service is started. Next thing you can do is click on the validate button. That'll do a quick test and make sure the license service is available and was able to check out a license. And if you want to take it one step further, you can click on view log and actually look at the license log file. So you can see it says that's where it's got the license file. That's the port that it's using, 27,000. Here's the version of the FlexNet license manager. Here's all your license features, and then at the bottom here's the test that it did when we clicked on validate. It checked out and checked in a license to make sure that it's all working. So at this point that all looks good. You can click on done. So although we went through that process and installed a license server, this machine still doesn't know about where to get a license from. So even though we've got the Discovery software installed in here, we still can't check out a license until we tell it where to get it from. So this is what you're going to need to do on this machine as well as all the other workstations. I want to configure client licensing for this computer. Click on that. Oops, let me just remove that. So normally it'll be blank. So at this point, if we're going to check out from a license server, you'll click on Add Server and type in the name of the server. 100-new. Now, if you had used a different port, you would need to uncheck that and put in the port number that you used. We left it as auto, so we'll leave auto checked. We'll say OK. Puts it in the box there. You say next, and it'll immediately just do a quick validation. So it'll come back and say passed if it was able to find it. If there was any errors finding the license server, again, they'll appear in this big box in the bottom here. And you'll say done. Now, this is also the same thing that you're going to use if you want to install a standalone license. So if you have a standalone license, instead of saying add server, we're going to do upload file. You'll browse to where you've got your license file. You'll see where it's coming from and where it's going to put it. It's going to put it in the same directory, program data, LMKR licensing client1.lic. We say next, and it does the same thing as it did with the license server. Does a quick test and says validation. So if it was unable to communicate with the BitLock, if I go back and I'll pull the BitLock out of my machine, when I say next, it'll say fail. And so here's the error, and this is the error that you'll get if it can't find the BitLock. And Flex ID error number -9, invalid host, and it says this is the host ID that it's looking for, but it couldn't find it. So if I plug it back in, next, and it's validated. Now you'll notice that you can have both in here at the same time, and you can move the order. So if you do have a combination of a standalone and network licenses, you would always want the standalone first, so that you're going to tie up and use the standalone license, and then anything that you want to start that doesn't exist in the standalone license, it'll roll over and try to check it out from a network license server. Once you say next, done. So now the license is configured on this machine and we're ready to go. Now if you got a new license file from LMKR, you're about to install 2015, you got your new license file. If it's a standalone license, all you're going to do is basically the same thing that you did to install it. You'll remove the one that's already in there. You'll click on Upload File, go browse to the new license file that you just received, say Next, and it'll do the same thing. Now, if you have a network license, it's a little bit slightly different, and so there's a little bit different procedures that I would recommend. So what we'll do for network one is we'll go to the directory where the license file resides, which is C program data LMKR licensing. That's the default location. And license file is typically called server.lic. So if we just got a new one in, what we'll do is we'll get that new license file. We'll copy it into here. We'll rename the existing one. So this is the file that it's currently using. We'll rename that to .org for original, just for backup purposes. And then what we'll do is rename the new one that I just received, server.lic, to the same name that it had been using. So now we've replaced the original file with the new file. So the license server is still running, so it doesn't know about this new file yet. So what we need to do is we need to tell it that. So we can either stop and restart the license server, or we can also do a reread option. So in the directory where the license management software is installed, this is where the license management tool is. Here's that Flex ID dongle driver. There's a program called LM Tools. This is the program from FlexLM that's used to administer the license managers. So if you run this, you could see a big list of different license managers in this box if you have more than one. But make sure you always click and highlight the LMKR one, so that's the one that we're going to be configuring when we go through these different options. Once you've got that selected, click on the Start, Stop, Reread. So at this point, you could use this utility to just stop the server, and once it's stopped, click on Start, and it will read that new license file when it starts, obviously, and begin using it. Now, if the license manager is running and people are in the software at the time, you don't necessarily have to stop the server. What you can do is click on the Reread License File button. What this will do is tell the license manager to read that new license file that we put in and replace it in memory with the new license file. So everything that's already in memory, it'll replace it with the new information. And anyone that's already got modules checked out, it won't kick them out. They'll still stay running and they won't even notice. And if we look at the log file, you can see here's where I stopped and started it again. And then this is where it did the reread. So it said rereading license file, done rereading. Here's all the license features that it found, and updating. So this is where it actually went through and updated all the license features with the new file that we just put in. All right, so that's basically how to replace license files. Let's close this down. And so basically, just in summary, we went through how to request a license file, Bitlock versus MAC address, standalone versus network. We looked at the LMT, the license management tool, Bitlock driver installations, network license server setup, configuration of the environment, and how to replace an existing license file.